What's going on, everyone? I'm AB Sports, and I'm here today to break down that Week 1 slate of games that we just saw. I have my 10 biggest takeaways. Let's get started. At number 10, the Washington football team is leading their division. The Giants lost to the Steelers, the Cowboys lost to the Rams, and the football team came back from down 17-0 to upset the Eagles and become the only 1-0 team in the NFC East. Wentz was sacked 8 times by Chase Young, Ryan Kerrigan, and Washington's ferocious defensive line. Dwayne Haskins didn't throw any picks and had some nice drives where Peyton Barber punched in 2 TDs. Wow. At number 9, let's move to 2 young quarterbacks who quite possibly had the best games of their careers last week. First, Josh Allen. Allen's career high in passing yards for a single game before this season was 266. Against the Jets on Sunday, he threw for 312 and 2 touchdowns while adding another touchdown on the ground. Allen has been this team's limitation in the past, and if he blossoms into a top-tier QB with that defense, the Bills may be unstoppable. Also with their best career game, Gardner Minshew. The Jags organization seems to want to tank for Trevor. I know one person who for sure does not want to see Lawrence in the black and teal. Minshew played lights out with only 1 incompletion and 3 touchdowns while leading a fourth quarter come-from-behind victory against the Colts in a game no one thought the Jags were going to win. At number 8, we have some rushing quarterbacks to talk about. Lamar Jackson isn't the only quarterback in the NFL who can do some serious damage with his legs. The 2 players who were at number 1, Kyler Murray and Cam Newton, led their teams to victories with their legs this week. Kyler did it with his arm too, and more on that in a second. But he ran 13 times for 91 yards in an unreal, untouched touchdown scamper on the road against the powerful 49ers defense. Cam didn't have any runs where he was untouched, but he ran over Dolphins defenders for 75 yards and 2 touchdowns in his Patriots debut win. And number 7, I said more on that in a second when I talked about Kyler throwing the ball, and that's because I wanted to give a whole section to how fantastic Kyler to DeAndre Hopkins was in Week 1. This is Hopkins' 8th season in the league and his first game not on the Texans. He was rewarded with a career high in receptions, hauling in 14 of 16 targets for 151 yards. The only wide receiver better than Hopkins last week was Davante Adams. I'll talk about Rodgers in a bit, but for now, Adams was spectacular. 14 catches on a league-high 17 targets for 156 yards and 2 touchdowns. Also, an interesting tidbit about wide receivers from Week 1, Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, and Russell Gage are Atlanta's 3 starting wide receivers, and they each got 12 targets, 9 catches, and over 100 yards. Matty Ice threw for 450. I told y'all he was going to lead the league in pass attempts this year. At number 6, Week 1 only had 3 running backs rush for over 100 yards. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who was electric in his Chiefs rookie debut, Derrick Henry because, of course, and Benny Snell, who came in relief of the injured James Conner. A few were close, including Christian McCaffrey and Josh Jacobs, who had an underrated awesome battle down in Carolina that featured 7 lead changes. But the player I want to bring up currently sits at 6th in 2020 rushing yards, and that's Adrian Peterson. He was signed by the Lions days before the season and took over lead back duties, rumbling for 93 yards and only 14 carries. Peterson is ageless. At 5, we've been talking about offense for a while. Let's get some love to the defensive side of the ball. 2 defenses I want to highlight in particular, Pittsburgh and New England. The Patriots look the same as last year on D, even with all their opt-outs. They picked off Fitzmagic 3 times and held Miami to 11 points. The Steelers' defense embarrassed the Giants. They held Saquon to 6 yards on 15 carries, and 2 of their defensive linemen even picked off Daniel Jones. At number 4, unfortunately, I can't just talk about the teams who did well in Week 1. Here's where I'm going to talk about the worst team of the week, the Cleveland Browns. I know the Ravens are elite, but the Browns were expected to fight for a playoff spot, and this was embarrassing. Baker barely completed half of his passes for less than 200 yards. Odell caught 3 of 10 targets for 22 yards. Austin Hooper was a no-show, Nick Chubb disappeared, and don't even get me started on the defense. Lamar tossed 3 touchdowns with ease en route to a 151 quarterback rating and 38 points. In Week 1, it was the same old Browns. Side note, they barely beat out the Jets for worst team of the week. At number 3, the NFC West. I know Week 1 is famous for being something people overreact to, but I think the NFC West is the best division in recent memory. All 4 teams feel like bona fide playoff contenders. The Rams looked great versus Dallas. Russell Wilson was flawless against Atlanta, and y'all know how high I am on the Cardinals. Like I already talked about, Kyler and D-Hop put on a show. And even though San Francisco lost to the Cardinals at home, you can't count them out because of all the talent on the defensive side of the ball. At number 2, I think all those NFC West teams can make the playoffs, but I only think one is currently an NFC favorite. 3 NFC teams stood out in week 1, and they are Seattle, Green Bay, and New Orleans. Starting with Seattle, I know Atlanta doesn't have a good defense, but Russ put up a stat line of 31 of 35 for 322 yards and 4 touchdowns. That's as many touchdowns as incompletions. Jamal Adams was also a monster flying around on the defense. Next in Green Bay, Aaron Rodgers is playing angry, and that is scary for the league. The Vikings were never really in this game. Rodgers went for 364 and 4 touchdowns, and Green Bay put up 43 on the road against a pretty good Vikings defense. Finally, New Orleans, who just beat up Tom Brady and the Bucs. The Saints D made Brady have a bad first day at the new office, and the offense, though conservative, put up some serious points. Speaking of serious, Michael Thomas' ankle injury is a serious concern. Hope he gets better soon. And at number 1, the AFC favorites. For reference, I have Seattle, New Orleans, and Green Bay at 3, 4, and 5 respectively in my power rankings, but they aren't anywhere close to 1 and 2. Kansas City and Baltimore are on a different level. The only difference in their 2 week 1 games is that Deshaun Watson is better than Baker Mayfield, so Houston was able to score in garbage time and the Browns weren't. I cannot wait for week 3 Monday night, Chiefs at Ravens, where we will truly find out who the best team in the NFL is. I hope you enjoyed this week 1 breakdown, and thanks for watching.